All right. So, hi everyone.
Hello.
Thank you for coming. Hello, yay. My name is Liz Tice. I am with Lone Wolf Development, but you're not here to talk and hear me talk to you all. You're here to hear from these guys. So I'm going to introduce everyone here on the panel, just from my right to my left. And I'm going to start it off with a few what I think to be quite interesting questions. And then after we talk through some of those, we'll go straight into a Q&A. So start thinking about things you want to ask from these guys, and that's basically how we're going to do things. Should be pretty informal. So instead of having them talk about themselves, which I know everyone here likes to talk about themselves, I'm gonna do it. So hopefully we'll stay down to only a few minutes here. No offense, guys. So let's start with Matt here on my right. Matt McElroy is the Director of Publishing for DriveThruRPG.com, DriveThruComics.com, and other related sites. Here he works with Wizards of the Coast, Fantasy Flight Games, Catalyst Game Labs, and other publishers to deliver your favorite RPGs and comics in digital and print editions. A longtime horror, dark fantasy, and dark science fiction fan, he is also the owner of Flames Rising Press, which publishes the type of fiction and games he loves. He Haunted, 11 Tales of Ghostly Horror, an award-winning anthology, is Flame Rising's most popular book in its current catalog. Matt is also a freelance developer of games, primarily working with Onyx Path Publishing on Vampire, the Masquerade, and Hunter, the Vigil RPGs. So thank you, Matt, for being here. Let's give him a round of applause. Wonderful. So next we have Ryan Dancey. Ryan has been a professional in the tabletop gaming industry since 1994. In the mid-90s, he co-created the Legend of the Five Rings world and collectible card game. He helped midwife the deal for Wizards of the Coast to acquire TSR, and his company, Five Rings Publishing Group, was acquired at the same time. At Wizards, he managed multiple card and role-playing game businesses and became the VP of Tabletop RPG Publishing and the Dungeons & Dragons brand manager. He organized the team that released the 3rd edition of D&D and the Open Gaming License. In 2007, yes. Thank you, Ryan. On behalf of most of us here. In 2007, he began working on the massively multiplayer online game at CCP, developers of EVE Online, and in 2011, he co-founded and became the CEO of Goblinworks to create a fantasy sandbox MMO using the Pathfinder world under license from Paizo. So thank you, Ryan, for being here. Let's give him a round of applause. This is Rob here on my left. Rob Bau's lifelong passion is creating software to augment the tabletop gaming experience, and over 500,000 users have made his products an integral part of their games. Rob founded Lone Wolf Development in 1994, and he spent the past 2 decades designing and coding 4 major software products specifically to complement tabletop gaming. The first of these was Army Builder for tabletop miniatures players, which was followed by Card Vault for CCG players, and then Hero Lab for role players. Both Army Builder and Hero Lab have become industry standards, receiving 2 Origin Award nominations and winning 2 Emmy Awards between them. Rob's latest creation is the recent released and Emmy Award-winning Realmworks.
Nice. Very nice.
Yes. A tool he's been dreaming of building for over 30 years. His hope is that Realmworks will transform the way tabletop RPGs are played by simplifying and streamlining the game for GMs, while further immersing players into the role-playing experience. So thank you, Rob, for being here. And last but certainly not least, Chris Matney, here on my left. Chris has been playing D&D since the original white box set, and yes, he still has it.
Nice.
He has created and run over 100 campaigns, the longest running, which ran 35 years and counting. Wow. Chris spent 25 years in IT and is a serial entrepreneur. Trapdoor is his 4th startup after previous forays into enterprise IT consulting and development. Trapdoor focuses on digital publishing using an automated platform called the Story Machine. And this is his first adventure into blending his passion for gaming with his experience with technology. He believes that books and technology can seamlessly work together, and D&D is a perfect place to start. So thank you, Chris, for being here.
Very cool. Yay!
So this is our panel, which I think is pretty darn cool. So I'm going to start it off with a question that I think will be incredibly interesting for all of you to talk about. And instead of starting over here with Matt, I'm going to start over here with Chris. So, no pressure. When tabletop role-playing first took off around 40 years ago, it's unlikely that the game designers... What?
I was there.
Okay. It's unlikely that the game designers could imagine a place where players would be sitting at the table with character sheets and PDFs on a tablet. So, and playing virtually across the country and adventuring in single-player and multiplayer RPGs themselves. So where do you see technology's role in tabletop role-playing in the upcoming years? And what sort of hurdles and pitfalls do you foresee as the industry moves forward?
Good question. Yeah, it is an interesting question. And I think one of the things that, having played for so many years, I can remember my very first adventure. And I can remember the excitement of rolling up my Hobbit Thief, and yes, they were hobbits back then, and going on the adventure without the constraints of normal tabletop rules. And it was a fantastic experience, and there was this sense of wonder. I didn't care that I had a +5 to my sneak attack abilities or anything like that. It was the story that mattered. And so as we move forward, the technology that I've adopted in my games is always something that gets me more playtime. I don't have a lot of time to play with my friends. I want to make every minute of those 6 hours that we get to play count. And so if technology helps me do that, and I think a great way for the technology of today to do that is help me look up the rules. I don't want half the table to leave when someone else says, I'm going to grapple. Grappling, okay, so, or I don't want to have the wizard sitting there going through his spell book and, well, what spell, there's so many things that the electronic world can do for us to get us back to what D&D is all about, which is staring at people across the table and eating them with a giant purple worm. And that's what I want. I think that's really the value proposition that technology has. And I think the big pitfall is we could make it into a video game. Mm-hmm. And that's not what role-playing is about. I don't want the experience to be everyone sitting around doing that. I want the experience to be, this is something that they use as a reference, but we're still sitting around facing each other. So, we have to make a lot of design decisions when we're putting our technology together, because we could do everything. We could one push of a button and the combat's resolved. That's not fun. And so when we put a feature in that actually, makes it less fun, automates the fun out of D&D, we've got to take it out and say, no, that's not where we're going to go. And I think that's the big challenge that we all face as we're moving forward. So.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. You want to have anything to add on that or no?
You're not just going to go with Rob?
Yeah, Rob.
Okay.
He was ready to go. He was locked and loaded.
Cut
him off. He's ready to start
talking. This way or
talking.
you going this way? She hears me talking all the time.
Yeah.
True. I'm starting to.
You're in her blind spot. She can't see you.
All right, Rob.
Piling on a little bit with what Chris said, but I think going one step further, and my specific area where I care the most is the goal in my mind of where I think technology needs to go is right now players are bombarded with all these different, cool, sexy, whizzy looking visuals from everything else in life. The average gamer's attention span is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And tabletop games have to capture the imagination and pull the player in order to combat that and to basically keep thriving. So one of the most important things I believe is that technology is going to need to facilitate the delivery of content ready for the GM to deliver to the players. So there's a richer, more immersive player experience. Right now, the current state of the art, if you will, is that technology starts and ends with the publishers getting the technology to the GM. And now it's up to the GM to figure out what to do with it and puts in, oftentimes, an inordinate amount of work in order to then translate that content into something he can then deliver to the players. And anything we can do from a technological side to streamline that process and have the content from the publisher ready to go for the GM is going to make it faster, less prep time, as Chris was talking, which is a major pain point for GMs nowadays. It's also going to lower the barrier of entry for new GMs. I've seen quite a number of environments where, in organized play settings even, there's plenty of players who want to play, but they can't get enough GMs to have all the tables to house all those players and make them happy. So GMs are the most precious resource, and anything we can do to make it easier for the GMs to make a great experience for the players is a huge win. And I really think that is going to be, technologically, if we can achieve that, RPGs will continue to enjoy this renaissance and explosion they're going through. To the extent we don't achieve that, they will stall.
So do you think there are any hurdles that companies will face doing that?
The biggest thing, honestly, is lack of capital, because this is not a...
We're not rich.
Yeah. This industry is a niche within a niche. So the biggest thing, I think, is going to be needing to get collaboration going between the different technology providers. We're starting to see a little bit of that, and there's going to need to be some form of data interchange between them. And that way, you've got the people who are doing the VTTs and the people who are doing the character creators and the people who are doing all the other pieces can all weave their content together and leverage their smaller individual resources, but collectively come together with a great offering.
Thank you. Brian?
Okay, so like my objective in every time I do one of these panels is to say something ridiculously outrageous so that you all Twitter it and talk about the crazy thing Ryan said. So I think the goal of technology should be to get rid of the game master. So let me digress. In the beginning, which I was at as well, my D&D characters, some of which I still have so little information. There's some ability scores, hit points, armor class, an alignment, some equipment, a name, maybe a race. That's the whole character sheet, right? The original role-playing games evolved out of tabletop war games, where they wanted to add more depth to the wargaming experience. And chits in a tabletop war game don't have a lot of stats on them. They have an attack value and a defense value and maybe some unit values. It wasn't until after role-playing game companies came into existence and started to make more complicated games that the characters began to become more complicated. There was a lot of people at that time who were writing for fanzines and for Dragon Magazine talking about how to add more simulation to the game. And they did that by expanding the detail and description of the characters. The characters were the interface between the players and the game itself. And so role-playing games as a hobby became very complicated characters. You had Rollmaster, where you had a million charts. And, the industry kind of went down that path saying, let's make really, really complicated characters. But the adventures are very simple. The adventures, if you look at like G1 against the setting of the Hill Giant Chief, there's almost nothing there. Like you look at it today and you're like, I can't believe this is the adventure everybody talks about as being so cool. It's like 8 pages long, really. There's almost nothing in that thing. It's a map that was drawn on one sheet of graph paper and some incredibly lightweight descriptions and like not a whole detailed backstory, but like a sentence. Like the kitchen chef is dangerous with his axe, right? That was the whole thing. Then people solved those modules as a way to sit down and rapidly play a game with relatively simple characters. So that's the era that I started playing D&D in. And you could literally sit down from start, like let's play D&D, to playing D&D in like maybe a half an hour at most, with character creation, everything included. Then when campaign settings came along, and especially with the Forgotten Realms, the industry said, oh, that's what we need to do. We need to create these incredibly elaborate backstories and these really detailed worlds. And then the fans saw that, and they're like, oh, that's what it means to be a great dungeon master is. I have to create, a whole fantasy world and flesh it out to the level of detail that the Forgotten Realms is. And now we have this ridiculous amount of detail on every imaginable thing. A lot of that product is consumed as literature, not as game product. People buy it to read. They very rarely will use it in an actual game. Okay. So all along that continuum, what have we been doing? We've been making things a lot more complicated. We've been slowing things down. And frankly, we've been limiting the number of people that can actually do it. Like the number of Ed Greenwoods that are out there making a home campaign is relatively small. Most of us aren't Ed Greenwood, and our campaigns don't feel like that stuff that Ed makes, right? It feels, it's cool because we created it, but it doesn't necessarily feel cool. Like your friends around the table are like, okay, I mean, this is all right, but can we go back to Faerun? All right. So I think that what would be awesome would be to re-empower players to just play the game. And the people who are the Ed Greenwoods of the world, the people who can write a great module, can create that content and then send it out through a pipeline that gets out to all those gaming groups to consume that content. So if you are a person like Ed who could write an amazing campaign setting, you could do that, and lots of people could explore and adventure in your world. But if you're not that person, your whole game shouldn't grind to a halt because you tried to do it and you failed, right? So it's possible for technology to take over a lot of the functions, the classic functions of the game master. The one function that was really hard to do for a long time was the idea of hidden knowledge. When you're exploring a dungeon, you don't know what's behind the door until you open the door. The game master knows, but you don't know, right? That's the hidden knowledge problem. Well, we're rapidly reaching a point where we're going to have relatively good artificial intelligence and relatively good algorithms for predicting people's behavior. And we're not that far away from the idea that you could have a computer-moderated environment that just is the game master. Like you tell it through some interface what you want to do, and it tells you what the responses are, and then everybody at the table gets to play. And if there is a person at the table who wants a higher level of interaction with the game, they could be like the banker in Monopoly. Like the banker isn't the game master of Monopoly. The banker is just somebody who's kind of facilitating and helping move things along so that the banker and the rest of their friends can all play the game more often. And so that's why I say I think that we could be evolving towards a place where we could actually be getting rid of the concept of game masters through technology.
Interesting. I'm planning to tweet that right after this.
One, just to pipe in real quick, one note, back in college, my main interest was natural language artificial intelligence. I did some undergrad research work. That was my first stint out of school working on expert systems and stuff. One of the interesting bits of trivia that one of the professors actually shared with us was when all the experts of the world got together, I can't remember what year it was, they got together and talked about, okay, now we can do AI, and now we can do natural language understanding, and natural language understanding we should be able to get done in, this is all the world experts, 2 to 3 years.
Right.
And
right.
20 years later,
right.
thereabouts, they had basically gotten to the point where they almost could model a smart rat in terms of the sophistication. One of the most beautiful things in my experience with RPGs is when the players think completely outside the box, and that's where having a good AI is going to be a real challenge, because an AI is only going to be able to do what the developers at AI really anticipated.
Yep.
And I don't know when we're going to get across that threshold. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, one solution is Mechanical Turk, right? You have...
Yes. Make that
so Mechanical Turk is okay. So many moons ago, there was a thing that went around Europe. It was called the Mechanical Turk, and it played chess. And it was a robot, right? This is like 1850 something, and it played chess and it beat people. It was really good. And there was this big thing like, how did this guy make a clockwork device that plays winning chess? He didn't. There's a human being in a box under the robot that was actually playing chess. Okay, so Amazon has a thing called Mechanical Turk, and you basically can give it a problem and a certain amount of money, and the crowd, who are people who have signed up to be Mechanical Turks, will solve that problem for you. So right now in China, the industry, it's hard to estimate, this is all MMO industry estimates, hard to say, between 1 million and 5 million people who do nothing but farm gold in MMOs every day. That's their jobs, right? And their pay is less than $1 a day. They don't make very much money. So there's a brute force solution to the problem you just said, which is something comes up in the game, the AI doesn't know what to do, you farm it out to 1 million Chinese gold farmers and they solve the problem, right? And you think it's a computer doing it, you don't know that some kid in Shenzhen figured out what to do, right? It doesn't matter to the players. So that's that's one of the brute force solutions. I think that the other issue too is that, in my experience, and I've watched insane numbers of people play, like D&D, the number of times players actually do things that are totally unexpected, is not that high. In fact, as time has gone on, games have gotten better and better at convincing players that they have the illusion of free will, and they really don't. Like there's lots of times in a game these days when you think you're being so awesomely creative, and yet the game master has a little note that says, if the players do X, Y, and Z, like it was kind of built into the idea of the environment that you might do that thing. And so when you spontaneously come up with that idea, it's okay. Back in the early days of D&D, first edition, rules were crazy. They weren't standardized. Systems didn't interact very well together. So, like if you put a portable hole inside of a bag of holding, nobody knew what it did, right? Now there's just a rule for that. The rules have become templated, and the systems are all designed to interact. So it's really hard to find a case where you can actually do something in the context mechanically of the rules that the rules don't have at least a default condition for what happens. But you're always going to have, like, Traveler is the case I use all the time. Like, the Traveler is the greatest and worst game of all time. It's the greatest game because it's awesome. It's the worst game because the players have spaceships in a universe full of planets, right? And every Traveler game I've ever been in, eventually somebody's like, let's go somewhere else. And you're like, oh my God, I have to make a whole world for the next adventure? I mean, it's crazy talk. So there are definitely places in role-playing when you can just blow up any expectation of what could happen. But mechanically, rules have been getting more and more and more tightly integrated, so it's harder and harder to find things that you can do in an RPG mechanically that the rule system doesn't at least have a default fallback. Like, this is what happens if no other rule applies kind of rule. So, but I'm absolutely not arguing with, like, I think the same thing, like Fusion has been 10 years away for 50 years. True AI, like strong AI, human brain in a box, it could be 10 years away for the next 50 years. It's really hard to say.
So, Matt, what are you thinking on this?
One of the challenges I see is we do have all of these awesome technologies now, and more are on the way. We have a few publishers making really enhanced ebooks with dice rollers built in and soundtracks actually part of the document. But we don't have enough doing that fast enough. And we don't have enough gamers adopting and trying out these technologies fast enough. We have dice roller apps where you can upload the ebook, so they're all part of one device. And virtual tabletop software is growing, but there's millions of gamers that are not using it yet. So I think part of the challenge is getting all of these things to line up together, and getting publishers especially who are very used to doing things this way. I print X number of copies, I go to Origins, I go to Gen Con, I go home. And they don't adapt, they don't innovate. And then getting gamers to also...
I think I know those guys.
And then getting gamers to also request and try these things and tell these publishers that we want to see your book in an enhanced ebook format or on a virtual platform, and we want to try this. Like, currently I'm running a vampire game with over Google Hangouts with players in 6 different countries. So the technology is there and the interest is there. Everybody just has to get on board.
So your answer has prompted one of my questions, so I'm just going to skip to
well
it.
Done.
It's a
Way
great
to segue.
segue. Wonderful. So you mentioned there's sort of there's PDFs, but then there's these enhanced PDFs.
Right.
And there's also, of course, the usual print, which publishers love, as well as digital publishing apps and delivery through software applications like Realmworks. So how do you all see content delivery evolving over the next few years?
Well, one of the big things we added recently was print on demand, which allows us to bring books that have been out of print for 30 years back in print, but on a scale specifically to the demand. So customers order a copy, we print one copy. So there's no warehouses storing hundreds of thousands of books collecting. And it also allows much smaller publishers that can't usually afford a traditional print run to actually have their books in print, because as we all know, there's a huge section of the audience that loves print books, and this way small modules that might not be commercially viable to do an offset print run of 10, 15,000 copies are all available to the people that want them.
Yeah, I've been a huge fan of hybridization between tabletop gaming and electronic devices for a long time. That's the reason that there was a character creator CD in the 3rd edition Player's Handbook. We really wanted to put a flag in the ground and say, this is an important thing and this is something that people should be doing. So I'm really waiting to see the first true hybrid role-playing game. Like, I think it should be an app. I think you should download it and you should pay like $2, and it should be loaded with microtransactions. If you want to play a fighter, that costs $1. If you want to play a wizard, it costs $1. So you can kind of a la carte buy your way into the system. You don't have to buy things in $30 and $40 chunks. And I think that you can put so much intelligence, like the character sheet should be your interface to that game. And there's so much you could just hide behind the character sheet. You manipulate it, and you use it as your guide to play the game, but there's a ton of stuff going on behind the scenes that you don't have to see. You mentioned that publishers love books. I don't think publishers love books. I think there's a certain number of people who tangibly like the feel of a book, and they like books, right? Okay, it's a thing. Everything I do is now digital. Everything my wife does, she loves books. She is still buying books. So I will never argue and say the books are dumb. Clearly they appeal to some people. But I don't think publishers like books. They're expensive to print. Okay, so in publishing, there's a thing we call the rule of fives. And to determine what the suggested retail price of a product is, you basically say a fifth of it is the cost of production, a fifth of it is the cost of overhead of the publisher, a fifth of it is the cost of distribution, and 2/5 of it are the retailer margin. So every dollar that you add to the cost of a product means that the SRP is $5 more. That book is most of the cost of the product. So the stuff you're buying now, $30, $40, $50, $60, $70, a big chunk of that money is the cost to kill a tree, hire some Chinese printers, put something in a boat, and ship it to the United States or to Europe or to Australia or wherever you're shipping, right? Publishers, no value to the publisher. They didn't make the game cooler. It doesn't have better art. It doesn't have cooler designs. It's not a deeper world, right? It's just a dead tree. So I think in some magical world, I think there's a lot of publishers that would basically say everything we do is digital, and if you really want a book, call Drive-Thru and they'll print you one, and then it's all on you, right? You opted into a higher price because you chose to have a physical object.
Do you think publishers will be doing something like that in the next few years?
I think the first one that does it really well is going to really be a groundbreaking thing. I can't talk too much out of school because I don't work for Paizo, but I'm in the same building as they are. They sell an awful lot of PDFs. I can't speak for Drive-Thru because I don't work for them, but I know Steve Wick really well. Drive-Thru sells, I can't speak for him. Drive-Thru sells a lot of PDFs. Yeah.
Interesting.
So, can I jump in? Because what you're describing is the product that we're building. With the character sheet, with all the hard stuff put behind. I mean, we've gone to the level of, you go into the web and you want to find out what Game of Thrones character you are. And you answer a couple of questions. We have character creation that basically does that same thing and drops you into an iconic character for a new player that wants to learn how to play. All the information's there. It's at your fingertips. It's cross-referenced, everything. But it's easy. And so we can get both the hardcore players and the people who are just learning how to play or maybe have never played. But I come from a publishing background outside of gaming. And so I agree that print books are not going away. I think print books are going to become more and more the collectibles. I'm going to buy a player's handbook, a Monster Manual, and Dungeon Master guides. I may never open them, but I'm going to buy them because they're cool and I want to have one for my collection.
Right.
But what am I going to take to the table every day? I'm going to take this to the table. And I think my everything that Wizards publishes for 5th edition comes in here, all the books, all the adventures, and it's all one place. It's all cross-referenced. As a DM, I can very quickly prepare for an adventure, take notes, whatever. That's really where the future, I think, is going to go with that particular piece of the puzzle. So I think that in many ways, I agree with the assessment. And we will always have printed books, and there'll be one person at the table with their pile of books and their pile of dice. What we found in our play testing is that person then gets tired of looking things up and asks the person with the tablet next to them. And after about 4 or 5 times says, "Can I just see the tablet real quick?" And so, at that point, you're starting the conversion process. And those people are going to eventually jump over. So.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what happens.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing that I see happening before then, that process is beginning now. But I think, well, not really before, but in parallel with it, if you look at what's going on with all the computer-based RPGs, a major cornerstone of their success centers on putting together the construction tool sets. And then you look at Minecraft and some of those games, where it's all about the community putting together their own creations. And that invests them into it, and then they're able to share those creations with each other.
Right.
And what would be ideal in my mind, just as a GM and such, and I'm not sure how this will jive with what you guys are talking about, so I love counterpoints from you guys on this, is it's almost like building blocks for campaigns. Think Legos for RPGs, where you mentioned nobody's an Ed Greenwood who can do the whole thing, but there are so many people out there that are brilliant at putting together a wonderful NPC. They can't do story to save their lives. There are people who come up with brilliant plots, but they can't do any of the maps or any of the dungeon stuff. There are people, in the audience here, Anna, beautiful maps.
I'll make a living of it.
Yeah.
I didn't do that 5 years ago. The market wasn't there. Now I live on it.
Yeah.
It was getting the individual pieces, like the Legos that you can, go out and either for free or for purchase, piece these things together and then assimilate them together. And a key element of that, though, is going to be having some sort of hub and some way to integrate those pieces, not just with each other, but also with what I create myself, because I'm good at one of those things, and I want to use her maps, and I want to use this guy's NPCs, and put it into my story, and now I'm good to go.
We're doing a little bit of that on drive-through with certain publishers that have opened up their game systems. Dungeon World is a perfect example. They've opened up. Anybody can create content for Dungeon World, so there's tons of new character kits and maps and scenarios being uploaded to drive-through all the time, and the most popular ones are being reviewed heavily and commented heavily, and they're kind of curating to the top. And then people can use those in their own campaigns, but other publishers can also use them in their published worlds. So if they have a dark fantasy, like a Ravenloft type setting that they're building, and somebody else created a really cool witch component, the way Dungeon World is structured as a publishing entity is those things both can be used commercially and not. So it's really a really neat way to see that game evolve.
The one thing that I think is missing currently, which is one of the things we're, as part of our roadmap with OneWorks, is that there's all these great pieces, but right now they are all islands. In that I get this great PDF, I get this other great PDF, I get this other great PDF, and now I want to tie them into my own stuff and have them work together. I can't do that without having to do a huge amount of work. And so what I want is I want to be able to take those pieces, weave them together, and this is what I mentioned about the integration aspect. I want to be able to pull them together into some sort of unified environment where I can then also, I hate that guy's name, I'm going to change it. And this thing, to make it work in my world, I really need to put it here in my campaign. So play with a few things, tweak it, and now I've adapted it to my world. It's mine. It's woven into my stuff, as opposed to all these different pieces where the bridges between them are effectively Post-its or a completely separate yet another document where I've got, okay, take this piece from this and this piece from this, and that's really unwieldy for a GM. If we can overcome that hurdle, we're all in great shape.
You look like you want to say something, Chris.
So we have the Forge, which allows you to build very granular parts of the puzzle, so maps or monsters or treasure or traps, use templates. You can then combine those into encounters, and combine those encounters into adventures, and those adventures into campaigns, and you can use them and share them with your friends, and they look in the application exactly like what WotC publishes for 5th edition. So if you're really good at making maps, you can make maps to your heart's content if you want to put those into an existing adventure.
Can you monetize through that?
There's no technical reason you can't. You couldn't do it. You can share. And so
just the platform just doesn't do it yet.
It doesn't do it yet, simply because that's not something that. It's going to take a while for Wizards to become comfortable with the idea that people could submit stuff to them and they can curate it and monetize it. From a technology standpoint, it is put a SKU on it, put a price on it, and click publish, and it's out to everybody.
I think that's actually a bigger hurdle than your hurdle. Like, your hurdle is kind of a solved problem. Like, it's data management and XML and having some standards that everybody agrees on how we're going to do data exchange. It's getting the publishers to unclench and say, it's okay that this person can sell something that is related to my product and she's going to get a revenue stream. That's a big hurdle to overcome, right? But you look at Valve and the amount of money they make selling hats in Team Fortress. It is insane. Literally, they cut $10,000+ checks to kids all the time who are making hats. It's crazy. So I think when the monetization piece comes in, then you're going to see your idea of this explosion of components, because people will have a way to say, I made a thing, and the equivalent sale price is 10 cents, but some unknown number of people paid 10 cents for my NPC, and now I could quit my job and I could do this thing, right? That will be transformative when that happens. Yeah.
So I want time for Q&A, so I'm going to move on to the next question. And if you guys want to hear more about that subject, feel free to, hey, can you go back to question number 2? So you all represent a variety of technologies: character creation, digital printing, MMOs. And some technologies I feel like have been more successful than others with both the publishers and consumers. So what makes something successful, and what needs to be done for a less successful technology to be embraced by the community?
Sure.
Do you want to start, Matt? Or
go ahead. Punt. All right, so here's my spiel.
He has a spiel.
I think we are at the beginning of the emergence of a new form of mass communication that is equivalent to the emergence of motion pictures in the early 20th century. The companies that were the pioneers in that field had a 100-year run of extreme success. Warner Brothers, Fox, Disney, Paramount. These are titanic companies because they were first movers in that space, and they leveraged their success across a century. That's happening right now, and that technology is virtual worlds. So my business is making virtual worlds that are more meaningful than real life. And people hear that and they're like, oh my God, how can you say that? What about my faith? What about my kids? What about my community? What about the environment? Here's the reality. Most people spend most of their time doing something they hate so they can spend a little time doing something they love. They work all day in a cube farm so on the weekend they can go skiing, or whatever it is that they do, right? The meaningful part of their lives is not the thing they spend most of their time doing. So the meaningful part for a lot of people who play in virtual worlds is what their experience is in that virtual world, the interaction with other people and the things that they accomplish. And even though it's all virtual, that doesn't mean it's not real. It's good in that there's huge battles being fought and thousands of people dying, and nobody is actually dying. But you can have that same feeling of, oh my God, 1,000 people had a huge battle and we won, right? It's meaningful, and in some ways it's more meaningful than real life. So there is something about this MMO thing, there's something about this virtual world thing that makes this business probably 2 zeros added on to the size of the whole tabletop RPG business, maybe 3 zeros added on. It is gigantic. And so, I'm excited to be on that side of the fence, but, my roots are in the tabletop side. And so, I'll be a tabletop role-playing gamer till the day that I die. And I think it's incumbent on those of us who are here at the transition to bring the best parts of tabletop into digital, and when there's great things that happen in digital, to push it back downstream to the tabletop.
Thanks.
End of spiel.
Anyone else?
You were about to say something. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a slightly different approach. I guess I do have a question for you. So in your visual no DM, I mean, I can't even get Siri to give me directions.
Yeah,
so
right. Don't ask her where to hide the body. I hear that's bad.
Yeah. I can't imagine trying to play D&D with Siri telling me what to do.
Sure.
In your vision, are there people still sitting around a table?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So.
I think that's the fundamental difference between tabletop and digital. I think it is the people sitting around the table. So I
But are they doing this? Or are they actually talking?
No, they're interacting with each other, I think, absolutely. And I hope I'm really not going to step on anybody's toes. I might be stepping on yours, and I'm sorry. I'm not a huge fan of virtual tabletops. I think that the value proposition of tabletop RPG is that you do it face-to-face with your friends. I think that as soon as you talk about how you have to do it over Skype or Google Hangouts or over the internet, you're rapidly getting to the point where you're saying, why aren't you just playing in an MMO? We're not really there yet. These two experiences are not comparable. There's many things you can do freeform on Skype or Google Plus or on a virtual tabletop you can't do in an MMO. But trust me, that gap is narrowing rapidly, and the industry has a roadmap where there will rapidly be things you can't do on a tabletop that you could easily do on an MMO. Let me give you a really quick example of what that would be. Weather. Weather is really hard in a tabletop. You don't want to change every stat and every game mechanic in the game because you fought in the rain, right? In an MMO, no harm done, right? Okay, so I think the value proposition is me and 5 of my friends get together at somebody's house, and we're interacting as humans. Humans are social creatures. We have a herd instinct. We like to be physically close to one another. Mm-hmm. We have out-of-game conversations. It's a social community positive thing, right? That part of tabletop, I think, is the reason it will never go away. Okay. I think what you do is you take technology and you make that experience better and better and better for everybody at that table. So they spend less and less time. So we used to have this joke at Wizards of the Coast that Dungeons and Dragons is 20 minutes of fun packed into 4 hours, right? Because you spend so much time on the not fun, right? And I think digital tools help increase the fun percentage of the time. They don't take away the fundamental value proposition. Sorry, that's a BizSpeak word. I shouldn't do that at this convention. We got together, we're at this table, we all know each other, we're having a great time, we're eating pizza and like talking about the weekend, right? That part is awesome. I just want to make that part more fun.
Yeah. Okay. So to answer, and I agree with that. Obviously, I'm more focused on a non-MMO experience.
Yeah.
At my gaming table. But to answer the question about technology and what technology gets adopted, I mean, if you think outside of gaming to just sort of your life, I mean, there are people who will adopt every technology that exists. I have a friend who was buying new cordless phones because he could walk 5 more feet from the base. Who cares? It's 992 hertz.
Yeah.
And that was his big excitement. For all the rest of us who are in the normal part of the bell curve,
Yeah.
you have to have
you're exactly right.
some value from the new technology to adopt it. DVDs came out. Hey, this is great. I got instant search. It's a lot smaller form factor. I can stick it in my car. It's a winner. Okay, so the VCR tapes were dead in my house the next week. So there's that level of adoption, but at some point it becomes so incremental that it's hard to say that that's a value proposition. So for the tools that we're all making and that we're all promoting, a lot of it is, does it give you a quantum leap in the value of the game that you're playing, and the quantum leap in the experience? Are you now saving that extra 20 minutes because we only have a few hours to play? And if it is, then it's going to be a win. And if it's not, even if it's the coolest thing ever, it's eventually going to fade away. And I think that's really the bellwether. If you just have to take a quick scratch test to see if it's going to work, that's what you want to look at.
I think, I just want to say that adoption rates on devices is a key thing too. Like when we first started talking about this, it was onerous to have somebody bring a laptop to a D&D session. Like not many people had a laptop, and it was kind of a big deal to have one, right? Everybody has a phone. Like most people are going to have a pad. The adoption rate of technology, the platform technology is so high that you could easily say, like, everybody bring your thing, and most people will be, okay, I got my thing. I got my device, whatever my widget is, right?
Well,
that's a big change.
The technology has to also allow you to use whatever device you have. If I have an Android phone, I have my iPad, I need to be able to get to my characters on both, or my laptop. And it has to allow people who don't want the technology to continue to play the game as well. So it has to be very focused on being very inclusive.
Yeah. The data from the industry is there's something like 1.5 billion cell phones in the world, and in 5 years there will be 5 billion cell phones in the world. So we are at the inflection point. It's happening right now, where it is going to be very unusual for somebody to show up and not have a smartphone.
Right.
Yeah. Whereas you couldn't do that for laptop-based like DM assistants 10 years ago. It was a really big deal. Like people would say, "Well, nobody has a laptop." Those days are over.
One thing from my perspective that you guys are talking much more long range, I think. My experience is that it's the single most important thing centers on what's the right word for it? I guess usability. It's like utility. I think utility trumps sexy. There's been a lot of tools that have come and gone, and I guess our products are poster children for this, and that there's a lot of tools that come out that are really sexy looking, and they come and they go. But what the gamers really want is a tool that the focus is on the table, not on the display. So they want something that's got high utility value, and then they can put it aside and focus on the game in front of them. Mm-hmm. Utility really is the cornerstone of it, and one of the big things that I think has enabled us to survive and thrive that many other companies have not done is that we took the long view. The one thing that is constant in RPGs is change. I mean, that's true in life, but it is even more so in RPGs, because the next supplement that's coming out, there are a bunch of brilliantly creative people, and 3 months later they're going to come out with a new supplement that introduces some radically new way of doing something within the game you just wrote all this software for. That basically means, oh, I'm going to have to throw out 10% of this code just so that I can rework things to support this new mechanism. And that has been the death knell of so many products that have tried to come into the space.
They can't stay current.
They can't stay current because the game is changing out from under them so fast. So utility and versatility, I guess, adaptability are like the two linchpins. How does that fit into you guys' image of what you're just discussing?
Well, I think for us it's somewhat simple in that we're tied to Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition.
Even with that, Wizards will change things out from under you every
Well,
year. Paizo does it to us.
Wizards just uploaded the updated basic PDF to their site yesterday, day before. So it's already integrated new changes and additional content. And it's only been available for
a few weeks.
Yeah, and I mean we've already experienced that as well. We're developing at the same time the rules are being written. At the same time, we're doing our design. Who writes software like that?
It's crazy talk. Why are we still doing it 15 years later?
But I think we do have at least a limited audience of game systems that we support, so that'll make it a little bit easier. And the flexibility that's built into the actual design of the expert system that we use for the database and for all the lookups is geared towards knowing things are going to change. And so we put lots of bells and whistles in that are not in use now, but for instance, every class is a SKU, so we could sell you a class, or every level is a SKU, so we can sell you a level. Every magic item is a SKU. Now, why would we build SKUs in like that? Because someday someone might say, "Hey, we want to do that."
Right.
And I want to make an item that's only available to a certain set of people. Okay, so now we have to make it so SKUs tied. So there's a lot of things that have to be done to sort of future-proof yourself, but you're never going to get past the fact that some game designer somewhere is going to go, "This is an awesome mechanic," even though it has no programmatic way to be solved. And that's what makes it hard. That's why not everybody's doing it. So.
I think that the problem has to be solved in reverse. I think the players have to say, "Stop breaking my app." Like, this book didn't sell well because it had all these app-breaking rules in it. And because it was an app-breaking book and it couldn't be quickly put in the app, I'm not going to buy that book and I'm not going to use those rules. When that pattern starts, publishers will stop breaking the apps, right? But right now, because you have a small number of people using apps and a large number of people buying books, there's no pressure in the ecosystem saying stop doing this, right? So I think that as more and more people use apps, like let's say that your business becomes very successful and most people who play 5th edition play with your tool set, right? Wizards will find it increasingly difficult to do something with the rules that break your app because their player population will say, "Stop doing this to us." Like 20 minutes of fun packed into 4 hours, stop doing this to us. Yeah.
Well, and also the value, for me, the value of D&D isn't new tweaks to the rules. It's more story, more content. And so the focus really needs to be on what content is out there and getting people excited about playing from that perspective. Like I said, my first adventure, I didn't care that I got a sneak attack plus 5. That's not the thing that gets you going.
The problem is that somewhere between 12 and 20% of the audience thinks that thing is the coolest part about role-playing games. That the rules keep changing and that they have to keep gaining new mastery over new game systems. And those are the people who drive splat books with lots of variant rules and lots of crazy stuff in it. Because their feedback to the publishers, "I love this, keep doing it."
Yep.
And 12 to 20% of your audience, that's a lot of money.
Yep.
All right, so until that part of the audience finds a new way to express the thing that they love, however that works out to be, there will still be people saying, "Man, your game is so boring, it never changes." It might be awesome, but they don't like it because it doesn't change.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're a very vocal minority.
That's right. Yeah.
Very vocal minority.
Yeah.
I wanted to see if you had anything to add on.
Let's get to the questions.
Okay, so Q&A. You raise your hand at first, so go ahead.
The problem with using technology, I've found with my players, and I've been bad at this myself in games I've been in, is you get distracted with what's all on your technology. It's like squirrel.
Yes.
So, the GM that I play with, he set up a rule about, use of computers. I did the same with my players. But I like the easiness of having everything on the computer, because with AD&D, I had the core books, the the supplements of the supplements.
This high in the books, you have to like look around them.
This tall and this wide, but I needed 2 guys to help carry it into the games.
Well, this was the solution to that was touched on a little bit earlier. Is making the apps and the tools completely useful immediately. Mm-hmm. So you get to the rule question or the monster stats or whatever it happens to be that you need, and it actually enhances play. You're not spending all this time looking stuff up and closing files and find out, because if the tools are available and they actually get you back to the table immediately, you're going to see a lot less of that distraction.
One of the key things right now on that is that right now the tools for players typically center on like their character creation, their character. So if they're focused on the story during the course of the game, then, well, my character's not interesting right now. My stats aren't interesting right now. So now they're tempted to go look at other things. But to the extent that that's where I was coming at earlier about delivering the content and the richer experience to the players, to what the device in front of them, and I think this is what you guys are doing as well, is that the more of the story elements you put in front of the players on their device, the more they'll be engaged. If they're looking at the device, that's fine, but they're looking at stuff for the story. And their head is in the game as opposed to on some other app that they have that they don't, they've got to look at their device. They've got to play with the device. It's like a nervous habit for many people. And if they've got the story there as well, they'll stay with the device and be playing with the story.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're seeing in our play testing. I live in the mountains, so no one gets cell phone service. I used to turn off my router. It's like, oh, the router's down, guys. Sorry. If I could find a technical person, maybe we could fix this. When we started running playtests on the tablet, I was really worried. There's always a few people at the table that were goofing off playing a game or whatever. They are Pavlovianly driven to touch this thing every 15 minutes. If you give them a reason to touch this every 15 minutes, they never leave the app. They don't go play something else because I now feel satisfied I've done something and I'm back into the game. And so we actually found, and it was an unintended consequence. I can't claim the brilliance of saying that's what was going to happen, but actually psychologically that is what has happened. And what we find is people look at this no more often than they look at their character sheet or at a rule book. And it really focuses them back, and we see almost no one leaving the app. The initial wow factor, maybe they'll play with it for the first session a little bit more, but after it settles down, it's just incredibly focusing for them not to have some reason to go back to this app to go out and check their email or do something like that. So.
But the bottom line is, you've got hundreds or thousands of references on there, and I don't have to carry my big giant toolbox.
This is your entire library. This is everything. Yeah.
That's what I love about it.
And you could use the electronic dice, or you could bring a small bag of dice and a couple minis, and you're ready to go. That's cool. So.
So I'm wondering if you guys see the perceived cost of digital stuff as perhaps like a hindrance. Just want to give you like 2 examples from my gaming group back home. We don't buy PDFs because usually they're only like maybe at most $5 cheaper than the actual physical copy of the book. So we tend to, my group buys like all the books. We're playing a 4E game right now and pretty much trying to create characters without the D&D Insider. It's pretty much impossible to do. So I pay the $70 a year for the D&D Insider subscription, and the way it was set up, my players like, well, we're not each paying $70 a year to do this, so we'll just run it through my account. And my group, unlike I know some of them, we have a lot of disposable income, but we're still, the perceived value for that stuff is, not there. So my group as a whole said, okay, together $70 a year is worth it, but individually it's not. So I'm just wondering, do you guys see that as a hindrance, and like your a la carte stuff going forward, like $1 or $2 for this and that? Do you think that would solve that?
I think Matt had something to say on the PDF side of things.
PDF prices have fluctuated a lot. I don't think we have a single PDF that's only $5 less than the print book on site. Most of them are half.
Okay.
And we're seeing a ton of publishers do microtransaction $1.99 PDFs for enhanced, like here's your fighter, here's your book of spells.
Or pay what you want.
Yeah, pay what you want is a brand new thing that's kind of taken the industry by storm, where people can actually determine how much value they want so the customer actually types in a price. So if they
or they
think
get it for free and then decide how much they value it.
right, and some customers are using that to support a publisher because they love this content that they're making. Others are determining, well, this PDF's only worth $1 to me. So it's kind of a new wave that's taken over.
The most profitable non-Apple app in the App Store is Comixology, and they price comics the same as retail.
Yeah.
I had this exact same conversation 20 years ago about trading card games. How, I'm not going to play this game, it's ridiculous. How are you going to charge me $5 for a booster pack every time I want to play? Trading card games are way bigger than role-playing games. If you dig into Games Workshop's financial statements, Games Workshop's the only publicly traded hobby gaming company, you can determine through looking at various data points that their average active consumer spends $2,000 a year. You're not going to win this argument.
Yeah,
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
we don't have our sales revenue numbers just keep going like this, and that's with Hero Lab and Army Builder. And with Hero Lab, it's $10 for an add-on, but people will buy 8 of them because hey, it makes for them it's a perception of time equals money, and for the vast majority of gamers, time is much more of a precious commodity than some dollars. And so I think that's also a tension that you get with the subscription model that Wizards used for 4E with the D&D Insider versus the pay for it once model that we use. It's 2 different models. There may be some difference there in that once you spend $10 on that add-on with us and it's yours, you've got it. And I think that's where the microtransaction idea comes in. It's like you pay for it once, it's a small number, and you've got it, it's yours. And we don't see any real, we get people complaining, but from a business model standpoint, they're just a few outliers who are whining. The real gamers will trade
Rob,
their.
I'm going to get so many emails now.
It's true. Time is money, and they will happily pay for us to do the work for them.
Just call that guy a whiner.
Oops.
I think you had a question over here.
One thing to always keep in mind is doesn't matter how well the program works or whatever you're doing. If it looks hard to use, people will not adopt it. And we at PC Gen have learned that so much. No matter how powerful the program is, if it turns people off, they won't use it at all.
That's that whole utility thing.
Yes.
There's a certain minimum threshold. Mm-hmm. You have to be over that minimum threshold, and then the utility trumps everything
And you
else.
also have to have a good interface.
Yeah, utility and usability.
But it does bring up a good point with when you're designing applications, you have to be able to bring in someone who's never played before and slowly get them involved in it to whatever level they want to be involved in. And that's a very, very difficult task to do when you're talking about a game that has so many rules as Dungeons and Dragons.
There's two aspects of that. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Somebody who's never played the game before, or somebody who's never used tools before, but knows the game well.
Right. Well,
which are you focused on? Because
the
arguments there are very different for how you approach that.
I'm talking about the person learning to play the game.
Okay.
I mean, you can put help in your app to make your app easy to use, and if you have a good UI design, you're okay. But I mean, we're still talking about Dungeons and Dragons, which is a complex game.
Right.
And how do you make that accessible to a new player who may not have played before? Make it so that it's friendly enough that they don't look, at this big pile of rule books and say, "Oh my God, what am I doing?" and run off to the other room.
The complication you run into with that is, at the same time, you want something that's highly accessible to the new player. Mm-hmm. Basically, you want the training wheels on the bike,
right?
But you also want that player to be able to take the training wheels off,
right?
And that's a very different problem space. Mm-hmm. and having the flexibility, because every single player out there is going to want to approach things their own way. They have their own concept, especially for a game that's highly complex like D&D or Pathfinder or Shadowrun, what have you. They've got their own mental space for how they approach character creation. And if you lock them into, you must use this path, like a lot of the traditional computer games used to always do. It's like, first you pick your race, then you pick, blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, you get halfway through the character, I want to go change my race. Go back to the beginning and start over, move forward again. That does not work. And then there's also the problem with so many games, everybody's got their house rules. It's like, in my game, well, we tweak this way. So there needs to be a way to support that adaptability to everybody's house rules. And that generally is directly at odds with making something highly accessible for somebody new to the game. And so there's this real tension back and forth. And if you focus on one without the other, well, you're narrowing your market space to some extent.
So I know you all have a ton of questions. We are actually at 2 o'clock, and I want to respect our panelist time. So I'm going to say that you guys if it's up to you, but if you guys want to stick around and answer questions individually, you're welcome to. But I know you're very, very busy and important people, so I don't want to.
Whoa.
This is the first time I've ever heard that.
So
anyway, that for my wife back there.
So I'm going to let you, since we're not getting the usual open the door and saying, "What, are you done yet?" Give you maybe two sentence wrap up. Where do you see technology going?
I think it's going to improve more and more as new tools are running and more publishers and more customers adapt to them, and we're going to get a lot of feedback from people about utility and usability and what the learning curve is. And I think the companies that respond to that need and those requests are going to be the ones that rise to the top.
Shameless plug, come to Goblinworks.com and you can see the answer to that question.
I think this whole discussion has been really interesting to me, hearing some very intriguing different perspectives on stuff. So I think we've covered everything that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I actually agree that the key is listening to the customers. We've put features in the product, and we've literally taken the fun out of the game. It's like, we can do it, but let's take that feature back out. And you really have to understand at a very, very deep level what your players and your customers want out of the app. And it's hard, but just because you can build it doesn't mean you should. And build an app that you want to use, and then you've got an app that everybody's going to want to use.
Cool.
That's a great way to end it. So thank you everyone for coming. Like I said, oh yes, round of applause. Like I said, if they can stay, feel free to come up and ask questions, but please respect their time. If they say, I'm sorry, I gotta go.
If we're not getting kicked out, if you guys just want to sit up here and take questions, we can keep doing that since you gotta go.
I think my next thing's at 3, so I've got a little bit of time.
I'm good.
Time.
Oh man, yes. Okay, you are so patient, so patient.
Unfortunately, I have to meet my wife.
Yes, no problem.
You guys were just starting to touch on something really interesting to me, which is when you look at your figures, sales and revenue and all that, or even just general statistics about the industry. Do you feel like most of the growth right now is happening from existing players spending more or doing more, or are we truly bringing in new people?
We're bringing in a lot of new people.
For us, we're definitely bringing in new people. From our sales numbers, the number of people who buy with Hero Lab, the model is you buy the core product and then you buy the add-ons.
Right.
Quarter over quarter, the number of people buying new core product is steadily doing this and has been doing that for years.
You mean different licenses?
Huh?
Or you mean different
No,
licenses?
totally new entry product.
$30.
Not a new, the $30 core product.
They're changing products then.
No, it's not.
You got to buy the first thing before you buy it.
Yeah. No.
No.
Let me clarify. That would be adding a new game system to your existing license. No, we're talking new people buying the product who's never bought Hero Lab anything ever before. those numbers are steadily climbing, which to us means the industry, we're seeing the same thing that I think everybody else is seeing in the industry from a publisher standpoint, in that RPGs are really experiencing quite a renaissance right now as a whole. And with Pathfinder at this point having held the banner out ahead as the #1, everybody though, Monty Cook's been kicking butt with the Numenera, now the Strange. Fate Core was hugely successful as well. These are games. Also, as I think about it, these are games where the focus is on the story, and they're very rules light. So that kind of ties back to what Chris was saying and Ryan was saying such also earlier. There's more people coming into the hobby as far as we can tell from our numbers.
Yeah, I can confirm that Drive-Thru RPG's new customer acquisition has drastically increased every year. Every quarter, we have new customers. The Exalted Kickstarter that Onyx Path ran is the #1 RPG Kickstarter.
I completely forgot about that one.
Many of those were not past edition customers because we kind of tracked who had bought second edition and things like that, and that was like a 25% gain of new customers. So
that's cool.
Laura?
So we've heard a lot of talk about technology, tablets increasing the tabletop interaction in a tabletop game, and there's great technology you can use with databases and looking at rules and such. Beyond the MMO, though, what kind of technology do you see coming forward to improve the tabletop experience? For example, the maps. We've seen virtual tabletops, and they certainly can do something for remote players, but you can get a really, really rich experience with an interactive table that we really haven't seen exploited yet. What, if anything, do you guys see as the future of that?
3D printers.
Yeah.
Oh.
I was thinking the same thing. 3D printers.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, you make your own miniatures. It'll be awesome.
You make your own miniatures for the adventure, then you basically, you just basically melt them back down, throw the same material back in again, and next adventure you produce some more minis.
That'd be so cool.
Yeah.
So by your collection.
Keep the ones you like.
Keep the ones you like, exactly. Those go on the mantle as the showpieces.
I like this plan, no painting.
We've got
for the painting challenge, like me.
One of the new technologies Drive-Thru is rolling out is we have print-on-demand maps coming out very soon. So dozens of publishers are uploading new files for maps for tons of different worlds, and customers will be able to pick and choose the ones they want and do cascade tiling. So you can just do a small map, or you can do an entire campaign setting. And different publishers are working together to make enhancements of those. It's very cool to see.
RFID tags on miniatures. So you move your miniatures around the map, and the map will know where it is.
Golem Arcana model.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could triangulate right now. So you could just have any map you wanted to. You could take one of your downloadable maps, you put it in a mapping application, and then as you move the figures around, it will know where it is on the map. Like, you don't have any external, that stuff's coming really fast. Really, really fast.
It's just your touch font stuff, yeah.
Yes.
I haven't used this particular software. I just recently signed up for Aethercon, and so I got to see Inferno and Roll20.
Roll20, yeah.
And they have different features. I'm assuming that at a certain level there's a similar interface. The thing that I want, in my mind, I have a table, and I've got two assistants, one behind the scenes on the computer and one handling all the little placements. Basically, I'm conducting, and they're working together to provide all that information. Is that something that your software would be able to do? Like where three people were basically manipulating the interface and working in conjunction, and then the players just at that point being able to see it.
You want to run a game table like producing a TV show with a crew.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
like audio manipulation from one person, character stats, most of the dice mechanics handled by.
Yeah, I mean, it can all be shared. That's easy to do. And so
that's Dungeonscape Pro. It'll be coming out in a few years.
Well,
can you share control, I guess, is the main question that centers on.
Yeah, there's not a multi-user mode for the content. Everybody would have the content.
Right.
They can share information between themselves
but in
using
terms of
either
the GM
messaging.
revealing pieces and such through the course of play. That's something like for us, our first foray is one GM, but that's something we've heard a lot of people wanting co-GMs and that sort of stuff. So that's something that is definitely on our roadmap.
Right. If you're in an adventure and you have a map or text or whatever you want to share, whether you want to share it with another GM or you want to share with the players, that's just a single click to highlight it, hit the share button, and you've shared that information out. That's easy to do. That's already built into it. I can, as a GM, I can already see all the characters. I can see all their character sheets.
Can you have multiple GMs at the same time? That's essentially the question.
Yeah. So right now we don't have a multiple GM mode, but it's not hard if people want that. That's not hard to do. So in the software, you set up the concept of the party. I create a party. I assign it to an adventure, a campaign, and then I invite people in. My friends join the adventure, and they tell me what character they're going to use. And this is all done, obviously, electronically. That sets up all the connections that allow me to communicate. One person is assigned the role of the DM, who sees all the information. They see all the maps, they see all of the adventure content, they see all the notes that have been taken for the thing. So what you're asking for is just to be able to assign 2 people as GM, have them see the same information.
Or just have 2 or 3 people log in with the same ID.
No, you can't have multiple people logging in with the same ID, but we can solve it a different way. The reason you can't have multiple people solving with one ID is I would sell one ID and you would all have it, and that would be the end of my sales. There's also problems with synchronization on the server, because remember, there's a cloud-based solution, so everything has to go back up to the cloud eventually. You can play offline, but really, if you want the power of being able to, send the secret note across the table, you want to be able to do that, and that's going to go up through the cloud. So that has to be synchronized that way. So what you would want to do is have each person with their own ID and just assign them all as GM, so they see everything together and they're able to share the information. So it's an easy feature to add. So.
It's an idea I have.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never been.
I've done assistant DMs a lot of times.
Yeah.
I've never had the opportunity to have an audio visual engineer, which is something I've always wanted to have. Wow. Somebody running like a visual board.
Right.
I've done it in other venues. I've had like DJ type setup party type of things.
Right.
But I just haven't had somebody sitting there.
So what do you want to do with audio? I'm just curious.
Sound effects, sound clips, prepared sound clips, doors.
Why do you need an engineer to do that?
What's that?
Why would you need an engineer to do that?
Because they'd be good at it. I would not.
Okay, so within the application, the idea of the sound, you buy a sound pack that has creaky doors. There's a sound pack that comes with.
There's also still in the conducting vein, where they're reacting to players' movements and collaborating between the 3 of us, and then also being prepared to throw up pictures of locations and things, so I can focus on narrative discussion.
Right.
Well, somebody's doing math and somebody's doing sort of A/B.
Right. So the fact that audio and all the maps and all the ability to share or show pictures are built in, you just all need the same access to the same interface, so you're saying the same thing. So that's easy to do. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've been ignoring you. You can go.
I'm used to it. It's okay. One of the things that came up, Rob actually mentioned it. I was curious as to whether you guys track things in other. He mentioned Golem Arcana that Harebrained Schemes is doing. That touches on some of the things that Ryan mentioned earlier with regards to integrating onboard things with the digital landscape, where they run everything through an iPad. Are you guys keeping track of that kind of thing? Since it's not technically part of the RPG industry, but it's tabletop. So I was just wondering if you guys all keep an eye on other developments in tangential fields, basically.
Yes.
Just to respond on that one real quick, there's an old book years ago. There's a little short passage in it, and it's centered on a guy going to a trade show and telling the guy at the entrance, every day as he left, I stole tons today, and you didn't see me. Finally, after the 4th day of the show, the guy at the front stops him. He's like, "What did you steal? Your pocket times?" Like, ideas. You know, it really boils down to we have to be cognizant of what's going on and who's coming up with other crazy ideas, because there may be a kernel of coolness. There may be something totally unrelated to what we're doing, but there's a kernel of coolness in that maybe we can translate and adapt to what we're doing. And so it's really important that we keep abreast of that sort of stuff. I don't think any of the guys on this panel would be up here if that wasn't in our nature, because that's how we've been able to succeed.
Also, if you look at the floor, there's a lot of publishers that cross-publish between minis and RPGs and card games and board games and whatnot. So they're all keeping abreast of those changes and ideas already. And a lot of us work with a number of those different companies, and you get to cross-pollinate that creative energy. And there's certain people that freelance for multiple companies, and so there's a lot of that.
It's a very incestuous industry.
In the back.
Hi. This may sound like a disjointed question, so I'll just let you guys say it is. But like I see a lot of your guys' tools as sort of like there's certain points on like a slider for what content has. So like you go to a full-scale MMO, like we've been talking about, you're taking away some of the interface, you're taking away some of the rules. You don't have to look at it; it just rolls all the stuff for you. That's like the far end in a way, right? Whereas like all the hardcore sitting around the table, even let's say with your books out, is like the other end of the spectrum where it's all of the nitty-gritty, right? So like for Realmworks, for instance, because I've used that. You know, that's almost you're bringing the slider closer to the MMO because you have a lot of information there. You're taking away the books, at least for the players, in a lot of the way. But then like there's not the turn-based aspect within the product, right? So you have all the information and just a step away from adding like, and it also can handle the turn-based kind of what everyone uses forums for still for whatever reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, so with that slider in mind, is there a way to make? I love MMOs, I love tabletop, and I love all the in between. But you know, when I'm at lunch and I'm trying to spend an hour doing anything that's nerdy and cool, when you know it's boring at work.
I love the fact those are synonyms now. Nerdy and cool.
For me specifically.
Oh, they're synonyms, and I love that fact.
For me, when I'm trying to do that, so I might be in the wrong realm entirely, but the turn-based. Being able to step away from a game and let people play through their turns, the round by round kind of interaction.
Yeah.
I feel like no one's going after that in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Like I still have to use a forum.
Yeah.
To do that, even though I might stand up my own server with my own PHP BB board on it, and I might customize how it looks and everything to make it kind of cool. But like I feel like all these products, for the most part, sound like they're pretty close to that. A lot of, I mean, I haven't seen yours yet.
I saw a research project a long time ago where somebody tried to make an AI player character, and the idea basically was like, Joe doesn't show up for the session, can you still play with Joe's character? And it did remarkably well. The technology was ridiculously expensive. You couldn't deploy it as a consumer product, but it was long enough ago that given Moore's law, that prices probably dropped rapidly, and it will just keep dropping, right? So. I think that is.
There just doesn't seem to be a solution out there for that kind of play.
Yeah.
I could be sitting around with Realmworks up, and I could have the second monitor there, and that works great. But say we wanted to be able to do that just at our own pace throughout the day. Say I have a friend who works second shift, right? So he could be in there all the time while he's sitting at his desk or whatever. Whereas I'm a first shift guy, so I can check him when I get home. But a lot of
You're talking about play-by-post.
It's basically, there's no way to do a good play-by-post, and I feel like a lot of the technology is so close but it's just sort of like maybe there's not a lot of people who want to do that, but because I still have my tabletop game and I still play MMOs sometimes.
That's what you're asking.
But there's no way to, there's no one even kind of hitting that in any way where I can just get to the game when I need to. I have to wait for my turn.
Yeah.
So yeah, good point. I didn't even bring that up. That's really what I'm talking about.
I mean, in a sense, you're describing Farmville. Yeah. It's an asynchronously played game that you play on your time and you interact with people on their time.
But I want to still be able to do like an initiative round, or I don't want to play Farmville. I understand what you're saying. It's at least dumbed down to that.
That's where things get interesting, and that's why we don't touch it at this point within Realmworks, is because Realmworks is very cleanly at this point. We draw a line. Realmworks is game system neutral. Realmworks is game system neutral.
Yeah.
Hero Lab is all about game system X versus Y and all the mechanics.
Right.
The moment you get into the concept of rounds and that sort of stuff, you immediately transition past that line into now this is game system specific, how this all plays out.
Sure, right.
And the moment you start down that slope, then well,
to each system kind of.
it's well now you have to have something that can adapt to all the different. Everybody wants it for their favorite game system, and now you have to have the mechanics for each game system. And you also start down that slope, and now, well, you've given me this bit, but I want this little bit more, and then this little bit more, and pretty soon you're re-implementing, you know, something that's very game system specific.
Gotcha.
For many different games. And so it's like Romeworks were really trying to go up to that line and then stop.
And then let the players all do
and
it.
that's
The GMs will do it.
well, that's where tools like the virtual tabletops and that type of stuff already have got solutions in that space. I mean,
Right,
different
but
tools.
They don't have the turn. They don't have the play-by-post in there usually.
They don't have the play-by-post, but that's.
Huh?
Yeah, just slow it down.
Well, it's almost like that slider. Like you can take an MMO and you can pull one step away from MMO and then just let it be turn-based.
Most virtual tabletops allow you to save where something is. So you can do a play-by-post.
You just have to run it yourself. In a way.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's one of the things that I think Paizo's going through with their game space virtual tabletop. But most of the ones on the market now offer that feature where you can save it, and then you can either send it to the rest of your players, or maybe you guys can upload it somewhere.
So it's just not structured, maybe exactly perfect for it. Okay, gotcha.
Any other questions? Wow. Okay. So thank you so much, and thank you to our panelists for staying another 25 minutes. Thank you. I'll let you tell it because it's so cool. I don't want to take the credit.
Free PDFs for everybody.
Whoa. They're here in the cloud.
So come up here, grab your free PDFs from Drive Through RPG.
Clouds?
Yes, fluffy clouds. Thanks for watching our Gen Con 2014 seminar, From Print to Digital, Changing the RPG Landscape. We want to thank Ryan Dancey, Chris Matney, Matt McElroy, and Rob Bowes again for serving on our panel, and to the audience members for their fantastic questions. Be sure to explore the other videos on our channel, and make sure to check out our website at www.wolflair.com.